It's just different.
Hey, what's up guys? Today I'm going to be going over UFC 257, which features the rematch between Dustin the Diamond Poirier versus the notorious Conor McGregor. So starting out, I'm going to do this one a little different. Instead of going through the whole fight card and giving you my picks of who I expect to win and what I expect to see, I've decided to focus on a few fights and some of the highlights that this card may bring us. So that being said, this is the first UFC pay-per-view for 2021, and it's starting out pretty much the same as last year, a big Conor McGregor fight. So I'm glad to see Conor's back to kick off this year for the first pay-per-view event for the UFC, even after Max Holloway had this crazy Super Saiyan-like performance last weekend. So there's a certain essence that comes along with a Conor McGregor fight week. And honestly, I'm excited to break down and talk about one of the greatest fighters the sport has ever seen. And also, I can't help but love the fact that he brings so much attention to the sport. You know, fans who don't usually tune into these fights tune in all around the world to watch him fight. Hater to love it, you can't say that Conor hasn't changed the game for MMA. So getting into this fight. So if anything, this rematch shows how far these fighters can progress and change their techniques, their skills, and their mindsets as they progress throughout their careers. So these two went from being the third fight on a main card to being the headline on a main event about 6.5 years later. And so both of these guys have progressed a lot since the last time they saw each other. And when we're looking at the last fight, we can see that there's a lot of differences happening this time around. So the last fight happened at featherweight, which is at 145 pounds is what they came in at. This fight's going to happen at lightweight, which is going to be 155 pounds. So the weight cut isn't going to be as intense. Both of these guys have settled into these styles at fighting at these weights. And Dustin's had more experience fighting at this weight here recently. You know, the last time Conor fought at this weight was against Khabib Nurmagomedov. And the fight after that against Cowboy, they actually fought at 170. So it's been a while since Conor fought at 155. So I'm interested to see how he's going to handle that. Also looking back at the first time these two fought, you know, Conor was only on his fourth fight in the UFC when he ran into Dustin Poirier. That being said, he was a far away from being the superstar we know him as today. And even though Dustin Poirier had been in the UFC for a while and had already had several fights in the promotion, I don't think he was ready for the crisp and explosive striking that Conor McGregor brought to the table. Although they do have some things in common, like both of their most recent losses came from Khabib Nurmagomedov by submission. Both of them have TKO'd Eddie Alvarez. Looking at where they were at then and where they are now, I think the biggest difference you can say is the pedigree of competition both of these guys have faced. Dustin has stayed consistent with his performances and he's fought tough matchups regularly. So he's used to being in the fire. He's used to being in these all-out battles, these all-out wars with people and surviving, and most of the time coming out on top. And especially when you look at Dustin's most recent fights, you know, he's fought Max Holloway, he's fought Justin Gaethje, he's fought Eddie Alvarez, and he's also coming off the Fight of the Year win against Dan Hooker. Meanwhile, after fighting Nate Diaz and Eddie Alvarez in 2016, Conor took some time away from MMA to focus on boxing with Floyd Mayweather. And after boxing with Floyd in 2017, we didn't see him again until 2018 when he lost to Khabib Nurmagomedov. And after that, we didn't see him again until 2020 when he fought Cowboy Cerrone. So it's been a long layoff. You know, there's been a lot of time in between Conor's fights. Meanwhile, Dustin has stayed busy. You know, he stayed in the ring, he stayed taking fights. So to say the least, you could say that Conor's been inconsistent. And that's something that he's really going to have to overcome, you know, the ring rust, the long layoffs in between his fights. Even if you say that last year wasn't his fault, you know, it's still been 2.5 years since we've seen Conor pass the third round. We don't know if he's worked on that gas tank as he says he has. That being said, it's no surprise that Dustin Poirier and his camp have been saying that they're really going to try to take advantage and push Conor's conditioning, his cardio, to see how far they can take him into this fight. But you got to make it there first, right? So that's a pretty dicey call if you ask me. So looking at the first fight and watching their most recent performances, we can see the development of how these two find success. So in that first fight, you could see that Dustin was very timid and you could tell that he wasn't as confident in his abilities as he seems to be now. And, you know, Conor was easily keeping him at bay with his kicks. Conor is managing his distance very, very well. That's something that Conor is very, very good at. I think it gets overlooked a lot of how he manages distance. You know, he did it very well with Eddie Alvarez. He did it good against Chad Mendes, even somewhat in the Nate Diaz fight, the second one. So looking at what these two different camps, their fighters and their teams could be planning for, I think for Conor and his camp, it's been same as usual. You keep Dustin at bay with his kicks, dynamic striking, hit him from different angles, only letting him get close whenever Conor wants him to get close so that he can land that crushing counter, eventually open him up with his striking so that he has to guess where he's blocking. I definitely think that Conor's going to want to fight out in the open. He doesn't want to have his back up against the cage. I think that's when we see Conor McGregor at his worst, is whenever he's being stifled, when he's being confined and corralled. And I think that Conor knows that the only two ways that Dustin Poirier can get him in those positions is by one, shooting in for a takedown and getting a level change to happen, or two is by overextending on his strikes and putting too much power into them. And if Dustin misses one of those, it could be very, very devastating for him. Some of the strengths of Conor's technique that I expect to see see is him being able to fight off his back foot. You know, we've seen him do that before very well. You know, he doesn't hesitate whenever he switches his stances or throws switch kicks or spinning kicks, anything like that. It all comes natural to him. You know, nothing seems forced. Everything seems pretty fluid. And on the other side, you know, I see Dustin testing Conor's willingness to engage in close quarters. You know, Dustin in his last fight with Dan Hooker was fighting in a phone booth, basically. You know, these guys are standing in front of each other, trading shots. You know, if you take a step back, I'm coming with another punch. If I take a step back, I'm going to try to counter it and come back with something big. I think that Dustin's also going to try to make Conor concerned about getting taken down. You know, he may shoot in for a shot that he knows he's not going to get, but at least it makes Conor worry about the possibility of getting taken down. I think that also Dustin's going to try to drag this fight out as long as possible. The longer this fight goes out, the better chances that Dustin has of winning this fight. We've seen him go toe-to-toe with brawlers like Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, you know, and Dan Hooker, like I said earlier. One of the best weapons that Poirier has that we saw on full display in his last fight was his explosiveness coming out of the clinch. You know, as soon as he gets out of the clinch, as soon as his hands are free, he's swinging, he's throwing bombs each and every time. They're very explosive, very reckless. They're coming to do damage. Ultimately, if Dustin can get Conor on the ground, on the cage, and keep that relentless pressure on him, I think that's his game plan. You know, stay on Conor until one of them gives. And that's a very dangerous game plan to have, but it's all or nothing for Dustin Poirier right now. And contrary to popular belief, it's not that easy to take Conor down. You know, a lot of folks have gone in there with that game plan of, yeah, just take him down. And it doesn't work out so well. That's why it takes like elite level grapplers to get him on the ground. You know, Khabib was able to do it. Nate Diaz was able to do it. There's only a select few fighters that can. Now, I think it all comes down to who can manage their distance and who can manage their timing very, very well. And so it's hard to catch Conor off guard, but when some of these high-level grapplers can, it pays off to a great amount of success because Conor does use a lot of energy trying to get back up off the ground. But yeah, the weight class is different. 6 years have passed since the last time that these two met. And in comparison, if I had to say who progressed more in that time between Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor, I would have to say Dustin Poirier because he's just developed so much more as a fighter. I think that's something that Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway have in common, that after they fought Conor, they got a lot better at their striking. They got a lot better at their timing. And it just comes with that experience and that skill of being with someone who's so dynamic as Conor. You know, preparing for a Conor McGregor fight brings out the best in you. Even Khabib Nurmagomedov has said that the best preparation he has ever had was getting ready for Conor McGregor. And so when we're looking at this in the eyes of, you know, who has more to overcome and who has more to gain, who has more to lose, I think we have to look at the fact that Poirier's been knocked out by Conor once already. Even though it was like 6 or something years ago, you know, it still stays in his head, I'm sure. And it really depends on how Dustin handled that. You know, did he take that as I need this motivation to push me forward to get onto the next level, which it seems like he has with the success he's had in his career? Or does it stay in his mind as a block? Does it stay in his mind dwelling on it? You know, I think Dustin Poirier is very mentally tough. I think that he knows how to handle his failures and his success, and that he uses that to fuel him to move forward. And on the counter to that, you know, Conor has set the bar high for himself. He's promising a masterpiece of a performance, and I'm excited for that. You know, I hope he lives up to that expectation. You know, like I said, last year, you know, he was preparing. He said he was going to fight 3 or 4 times in 2020, but like I said, COVID took over everything, shut everything down. And this year, I mean, he's already gone out and said he's going to fight at least 7 times in the next 18 months, I believe, which more power to him. But it's also one of those things I hate to see, because I think we take for granted a lot of times the athletes we have fighting in the sport. You know, one bad fight, one injury, it could end your career. So I know Conor has that focus on the fight in front of him. And I feel that energy of him wanting to have a great 2021. That's understandable. But let's see what focus he can bring into this fight for right now. Conor and his camp have gone on multiple times saying that this is the best shape he's ever been in. This is the best version of Conor McGregor we're ever going to get. And his reasoning behind his loss against Khabib Nurmagomedov was because he was distracted with promoting Proper 12, and you know, he wasn't fully focused on camp and he wasn't fully focused on training. I just want to keep that in mind, that if Dustin Poirier does beat Conor McGregor, that there's no more excuses, no more my foot swelled up like a balloon. You know, this is the best version of Conor McGregor, and if Dustin Poirier beats the best version of Conor, he should get all credibility for doing that, you know, for taking the right preparation, for taking the right strategy, executing it to the fullest extent. So ultimately, I do believe that Conor McGregor has more to lose on this fight than most people may think. You know, if he ever wants to have UFC gold again, he has to win this fight. If he ever wants to have even the possibility of that rematch with Khabib, he has to win this fight. If he loses, I think that the only thing that we'll see is him fight Nate Diaz one more time for the trilogy fight and then ride off into the sunset with his millions. Dustin, on the other hand, has everything to gain from this fight. Win against someone like Conor McGregor catapults you to like the next level. Dustin's already fought for the UFC title once. He is putting his name in the hat to have another shot at the title. And he has the interest and investment of the hardcore fans, you know, the ones who know him from Fightville, the ones who've seen his successes and his failures. And fans believe in his ability to deliver memorable, awesome fights, you know, win, lose, or draw. Dustin Poirier brings out that fight in people. I think Dustin Poirier, even if he loses, he's still going to have the support of the fans. You know, people are still going to tune in to see him fight. We could tell the hunger that's behind this man. You know, that's what makes him so interesting to watch. That he's already got the respect. He's already a fan favorite. But his desire and the hunger to be a champion is just what fuels him. You know, it's what gets him up out of bed every morning. It's what makes him want to train harder, be better, be a better version of himself. We're going to be watching a man doing whatever it takes to achieve his dreams. Every time he fights, I get that feeling whenever Dustin Poirier steps into that octagon that he's giving it all he has. Like at the end of this fight, he either has to be knocked out or almost dying before he leaves. So yeah, I do believe Poirier strives to be a true champion. I do believe he's a champion at heart, and every time we see him fight, we see that hunger in him, you know, and on Saturday night, we're going to see that same hunger, probably on a completely different new level. But from a different perspective, ultimately, the ones who have the most to lose are Dana White and the UFC. I mean, Conor is their star boy. It's no secret that Conor brings more money to the UFC, so Dana White loves to see him win. There's so many possible matchups you can make whenever Conor wins. You know, the company makes more money when Conor fights. Conor is the Floyd Mayweather to boxing. He's the Kobe to the Lakers, RIP. He's the Cowboys to the NFL. You know, no matter what, people are going to tune in to see him. It doesn't matter if Conor is fighting a paper bag. That pay-per-view is probably still going to sell. Needless to say, I'm excited for this matchup. Dustin has never looked better, and Conor hasn't been this focused since his uprising, it seems like. So overall, I see this ending in a second round knockout victory by Conor McGregor. I think Conor's going to be able to utilize his distance and his angles to find some openings to hit Dustin Poirier with some damaging shots. And eventually in the second round, he's going to get his timing down in order to hit Dustin with a kill shot. So that being said, guys, some other notable fights are going to be watching Dan Hooker take on Michael Chandler. Dan Hooker coming off the fight of the year performance against Dustin Poirier, and Michael Chandler making his UFC debut coming from Bellator, where he was a former lightweight champion. Chandler saying that he's been waiting his entire career to fight the type of fighters that are in the UFC, and he's ready to make a big impression on his first UFC debut. So Michael Chandler is an experienced wrestler, and he doesn't mind engaging in some striking if that opens up a way for him to shoot in for a takedown. Once he gets to the ground, he's usually looking to shoot for a head and arm triangle, if not a rear naked choke. And his track record is pretty balanced. You know, he has some wins by submission, some wins by decision, but ultimately most of them come from TKO. So we'll see how Michael Chandler handles Dan Hooker, who's definitely trying to get back into the winning column again. And I see this one going in favor of Michael Chandler, you know, by first round TKO. If he can get Hooker on the ground, I see him just raining down with punches, if not shooting in for his submission, but more than likely TKO. And so the last fighter I want to bring up is Amanda Ribas. And so she's coming off the submission win over veteran Paige Van Zandt, and she's continuing to make a name for herself in the UFC strawweight division. I believe she's currently ranked 10th, and her opponent, Mariana Rodriguez, is ranked 8th. So she's trying to make that climb up that rankings ladder. Ultimately, I see Amanda taking this win via submission in the first round. If you haven't already, guys, please go and follow my friends. They're making some great content on multiple different platforms. Other than that, please like and share the video. Stay safe, stay blessed. See you in the next video. Thank you.